Well, I think it shows how simple economic management is, that we thought that dealing with a budget emergency was difficult and tough, but all you have to do is declare that it's over, and it's over, apparently. And that's what happened. Just out of the blue, he called the most remarkable news conference on Wednesday, which I think is the most important news conference that's been held this year, because it declared a completely new approach to economic management. He said that we've gone from a budget emergency, a crisis, an out-of-control budget deficit to a manageable situation. The rationale behind it, the way that he justifies this is by saying, if you take this sort of mythical, fictional government, the previous government re-elected, if it had been re-elected and then did nothing, then this would be the situation. Now, we've done better than that, and therefore it's now manageable. Now, if that's the new benchmark, then it's a long way from the kind of discipline that he'd been talking about for so long.
You make this point in your drum column going up this morning. It's a complete U-turn from the arguments the government was making not too long ago about the need to cut more and bring the budget back into surplus.
Yeah, and also the language that he uses now, and what really struck me during that news conference when he said this budget will be dull, of course, that's what he said on the Neil Mitchell program, but he said it won't be as exhilarating for those who are budget devotees or structural reform enthusiasts.
What?
It uses now almost as a derogatory term that if you worship a surplus, you're a structural reform enthusiast. Well, who were the structural reform enthusiasts 5 minutes ago?
That's true.
And I think this is what's going to make it so difficult for people, not only, but I think ministers, to get their heads around is that now there's not this focus on the deficit after all.
This sounds like it looks like a flailing government. I mean, the messages are just all over the place now.
Yeah, I think when he showed that graph as well, and one of the reporters pointed out, but hang on, what happened to this surplus that you promised? And in fact, they did promise a surplus in the first year and then surpluses after that. And he said, well, we get close. You know, we get that close in 4 or 5 years' time. And then the same graph showed it falling off a cliff after that, and then no surpluses for 40 years. It's almost as if he had just read a briefing note or something on the report and hadn't read the whole thing.
Now, rivalling your column in Packing a Punch this morning, Barrie, is Laura Tingle's effort in the Australian Financial Review this morning. And we bring up the killer opening part of it. We don't seem to be quite able to take in the growing realisation that we're actually being governed by idiots and fools, or that this actually has real-world consequences. She doesn't pull her punches.
Yeah, I suppose it's either that or if they're not the idiots and fools, they think everybody else is. Because the sort of logic behind that presentation on Wednesday is just, I think, escapes most people.
The second failure of Christopher Pyne's higher education reforms in the Senate and the failure to win over an admittedly very difficult Senate was also a centrepiece this week. What did it tell us about the way the government is doing business and how it sees itself?
It says a lot about the way that politics operates, because when you look at the situation right now with universities, governments of all persuasions have just stopped funding higher education at an adequate level, and yet the Senate now denies them, the universities, the opportunity to find other means of topping it up. So it's an impossible situation. But what we have, I think, discovered, and the Australian has been on the case this week on this, is that the Prime Minister's not trying hard enough with the crossbenchers. They're simply not seeing enough of him, and when they do, they're not impressed. And then that comment from his office that he's just too busy for this kind of work. This is the essential work, getting the legislation through the Senate, and he seems to be too busy for it. So I think it shows the government's not good at this. It's not good at negotiations, and the Prime Minister is not prepared to lead it. And
it didn't really finish on such a good note for the government to care of the Prime Minister's Nazi reference in Question Time yesterday.
Yeah, and again, I think this is the kind of thing that would make some of the backbenchers nervous. I think, well, look, we had an opportunity. Should we have taken our opportunity when we did? Because this is just going on. Look, admittedly, Mark Dreyfus had used a similar reference in the past.
That's an important point to make here. I mean, if they're using these terms, these dreadful terms, so loosely on both sides, then it's got to be mentioned. Yeah, but it's different when the Prime Minister uses it, and the fact is, the political reality is that it's a Prime Minister who's under close scrutiny right now. So it was more damaging for him. And he knows that because, you know, how effusively did he immediately backtrack and apologise? Yeah, and it's that old argument about who in the argument defaults first, you know, to the Nazi reference, loses the argument immediately. Now, look, the rumours around just who may have speculated about or seriously called for a possible double dissolution. Where have you come to on that? Where do you land on all this?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that somebody at a very high level in government raised the prospect. Why would he do it? probably because he wants to put a bit of discipline into the show. He wants his own people to start thinking about election outcomes and election timing and not so much about the leadership. So I think it was more a political thing, but if they thought about it, they wouldn't have thought about it for long.
Finally, your Wooden Spoon award, and I guess, Barry, the fix is in on this one.
The fix is in. Look, Christopher Pyne on Sunday said he was deadly serious about sacking 1,700 scientists if his legislation went down in the Senate. And then the next day, he withdrew that threat and then said, see, I fixed it. So it's, sure, he might want to be known as a fixer. You put up some crazy idea and then you withdraw it within 24 hours and that makes you a fixer. He's sticking with it, by the way. He seems to be pleased with the
he certainly is. He's made further comment on this on Breakfast TV this morning. Have a look.
I was asked about fixing the National Collaborative Research Infrastructure Scheme, which Labor defunded. I refunded and kept it open, so I fixed the problem. Now, there seems to have become this great sort of campaign around being the fixer. I'm happy to be regarded as the fixer. I fixed the curriculum.
Yes.
Fixing teacher training. Fixing independent public schooling.
Yes.
Fixing parental engagement in schools.
Yes.
I mean, the list is endless.
The list is endless. He's doubled down.
Graham Richardson, who has been around the block once or twice, in his column in The Australian today, said, drop it. Drop it. That's his advice.
That's right.
It's good advice.
Stop celebrating the failures in the Senate.
You've got to live up to those kind of names once you put them out there.
Heck of a program this week to watch. Thanks, Barry.
Thanks very much, Barry.